dictionary definition of music is the art of arranging sounds in time through the elements of melody, harmony, rhythm, and timbre. Low Pass Filter is a show about the nature of this thing we call music, how it functions in people's lives, how it's contextualized by society, and why we find certain music meaningful. This is Low Pass Filter. Hello, and welcome to Low Pass Filter. This is a show about music and what it means in our lives. My name is Mateo Noche, and I'm here with our co-host, Bandon Wayne. Bandon, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me again, Matt.
Yeah, beware the Ides of March.
What was that?
I said beware the Ides of March.
Ah, yeah.
It's the 15th, and it's crazy that we're this far into the year already. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been some couple decades probably that I've realized the first part of the year seems to go by really fast, and then the second half seems to go a little slower for some reason.
Yeah, well, the time has been weird anyway, given COVID and all the other stuff that's going on in the world. So, yeah.
Indeed.
So, today, we're going to talk about music with a function. And that's my topic, my turn to pick the topic. And so ordinarily we think of music as, something we listen to and enjoy. And but there are music that do jobs in society. And for whatever different kinds of things. Probably the first music, of course, that had a purpose, that had a function, was religious music, right? So, Gregorian chant, or hymns later on as we got into the more modern era. There are music that gives you group identity, they're like songs that people sing at soccer matches, for their team and their side, and or sort of musical chants that they do, especially in England and in Europe as well. Sell a product or film music is another function, a functional music. Increasing nationalism or propaganda, along the same line. Or dance, just something as simple as music to dance to. So, as always, we have our Spotify playlists. You can find them in the description below. We each have one for the music that we picked out. We do that because not because we're cheap, but because we don't want to have to pay or have our this video monetized. Which is something that YouTube would do if we put in anything that was recognizable by the way of music. So you can find our Spotify playlist. You can follow along as we talk about these songs. And I don't know. Why don't you start off? What do you have on your list? Give us a couple of yours.
All right, sure. So you listed off some of the big examples of music that is with a functionality behind it for a purpose, I suppose we could say, beyond just pleasure or listening simply to enjoy the artistry and creativity of the musical artist. So I was going to say, I think my playlist is maybe just a little out of order, but I think where I started was relaxation or meditational music. you mentioned religious music. Gregorian chants is an example of old Catholic sort of worship music or devotional music, I suppose. But I think the meditative and relaxation music came to my mind first because I happen to really enjoy music like that. Actually, more for the artistry than actually the functionality of it. Although it is very relaxing for me, I find that there actually is a lot of creativity and interesting musicianship to be found in that realm of music. So in the 70s, you had a lot of stuff that was meditational, but a lot of it focused kind of in the area of exploring space, kind of cosmic music. So I think that kind of led to the term New Age in the 80s. And unfortunately, New Age kind of developed a negative connotation for a lot of people who liked, popular music and rock and roll music and stuff like that. You'd think of Ray Lynch with Deep Breakfast or Enya. And I didn't put examples of those. I put some other stuff. But, I guess people took it to be kind of soft and without an attitude. But really it has its own attitude. And, I guess the intention behind it is to chill out and relax and maybe tap into some other vibrations that can be healing. So I guess that would be a good way to describe it too, music for healing. And certainly if you go to a cool herbal store or naturopathic type store, usually you can find some music there that kind of goes hand in hand with the practice of such things. So I started with that. And then I picked out 2 or 3 songs aimed towards children. Raffi is a big example there. But that came to my mind because a lot of music like that is designed to help children progress, to grow and to learn. So I thought that fit the category well. It can certainly be music that sounds like other popular music, but it's geared towards the young mind. I tend to like the stuff like that is for the young mind, but is relevant to anyone. I always thought Sesame Street music was a great example of that because it didn't speak down, it didn't pander to being young and naive. It was like, hey, a kid can understand a groovy tune, but we'll blend that with educational ideas, and so I always dug on stuff like that.
A couple of these people that were really great writers, and were jazz guys, and so they had some real talent.
Yeah.
And I also think of like the Electric Company was another one.
Yeah.
That had that thing. Now you mentioned New Age music, and so I kind of went back a generation to Exotica, Diana, So I had Martin Denny in there, who I'm a huge Martin Denny fan, and I also put in Herb Alpert. Not Hawaiiana, but he's very what you call easy listening, I guess would be his category. And so sometimes this is referred to as musical wallpaper. Music you can have on in the background and doesn't, it's not interruptive or interfering with your tasks or whatever you're trying to do. I find that I can't listen to modern music when I'm trying to read. The bass line just takes me away from anything that happens. So things like classical music, easy listening music, even new age to a certain extent, which I like to call gift shop music, is something that you can listen to without, without it interrupting your train of thought. So,
Yeah.
and I put in Casino Royale and by Herb Alpert and a couple of things by Martin Denny, and I really didn't even know anything about them until this movie called Atomic Cafe, which came out in the 80s, which was about the nuclear tests in the South Pacific. And the entire movie was basically set to that type of music because it kind of what was going on in the background at the time. And so I went out and found like my first Martin Denny record in the cutout bin, at the local record store, or maybe even in the used bin, and I just really appreciated the artistry. I mean, you always think of Muzak is another one that comes up a lot. And you think of that as just, throwaway kind of music without any virtuosity or any real chops behind it. But especially in the case of like Martin Denny and Arthur Lyman and some of these other groups, I mean, they were really great players, and doing innovative things, including bird calls, in the middle of their songs. So, so that kind of cues off of that new agey and musical wallpaper.
Yeah, that music in particular can be very engaging. There actually is some edge to it, but it has that quality that can be in the background, that quality that is inoffensive to most people. I'm sure that some people may have a really strong aversion to hearing it, but for the most part, that's why they called it, like you said, Muzak or elevator music, because it creates an ambiance without feeling aggressive to most people. Most people just accept that it's there, and maybe even can give people a sense of calm.
Muzak exactly designed for that. People have a tendency to think that it was meant to lull you into complacency or what have you, or keep you calm. But it was originally intended to make people work harder. So they would, the first music came in 15-minute blocks, or Muzak came in 15-minute blocks, and it would get progressively faster and faster and faster in tempo to make the listeners work harder. And then it would be alternated with 15 minutes of silence. So it would go through the original Muzak. The concept was 15 minutes of music, 15 minutes of silence. But the Muzak was always getting faster and faster to try and motivate people to work harder or build more widgets, shop faster or whatever they might have been doing.
Is there a specific place of origin where that came from?
Muzak was invented by this guy named Theodore Adorno, who started the company in the 1930s. You kind of think of it as a 50s or 60s phenomenon, but he started back in 1937, and he thought of jazz as qualified as Muzak. He thought that jazz was essentially wallpaper. So he really got big in the 50s and the post-war world, when shopping malls became a thing, and elevator music, as you mentioned before, supermarkets. Although in my supermarket, they play synth pop now, so I don't know if that qualifies as Muzak now. But one of the original investors in Muzak was Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president of the United States, who was a huge investor and promoter of Muzak. Its heyday was the 50s, 60s, and then kind of into the 70s. And then it just sort of started fading away and being replaced by everyday music. Now you can listen to, Human League while you're shopping for tomatoes,
Yeah.
and that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, today it would probably be similar to what you might hear on the pop oldies station, which is now music from the 60s through the 80s. Yeah, somebody said something funny the other day that it was in a chat, but they said they had this moment at the grocery store where they heard like 7 great songs in a row. I was like, yeah, usually I'll get maybe 2 or 3, but 7, man, that'd be exciting.
On my list, I had things, like "We Are the Champions" by Queen,
Yep.
and "We Will Rock You," which have sort of been taken over by sports franchises. You'll hear it played at football games or soccer matches or what have you. So it's music that didn't start out with a functionality, but acquired a functionality along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was British glam rocker? I didn't think of that one for my list, but you know who I'm talking about. Gary Glitter.
Gary Glitter, that's right.
Yeah, he had a song that,
One, I think is the name of that song.
there you go. Yeah, that became a sports anthem.
Yeah.
You can go back to the 60s with Hey Hey, Nah Nah Hey Hey, Kiss Them Goodbye.
Yeah. And even things like Sweet Caroline. I think it's the Boston, the White Sox or the Red Sox use that as their theme. And if you go to see the Crabs here in Humboldt County, you'll hear that a lot being played. Another example of music that has a function is ice cream truck music.
Man, that did not come to me. Yep. Yeah.
So, and the purpose is purely commercial, to alert the kids that the ice cream truck is in the neighborhood, and get them out there to buy some ice cream. I mean, I remember as a kid hearing the ice cream truck from, I must have been a mile away, and then getting some money off my mom and getting on my bike and going out to search out the ice cream man was very, very exciting.
That's such a cool thing. That's something that I really appreciate still exists today. It's not quite the same paradigm, but somebody gets the idea to start a roving ice cream truck. I think that's a great thing. So I would guess that the origin of that music is maybe in the sort of circus, calliope kind of music or something like that. Unique sound.
It's music for a commercial purpose. So I noticed some intersection with our list is the jingle, "I'd like to buy the world a Coke," which is a way of selling soft drinks to people.
Yeah, for sure. I saw that on your list, and I included a couple other commercial jingles, I think. But that's a big one. And I think when that song came along, it was before my time, I believe. But it ran as their ad for quite some time. And it seems to me they were trying to tap into the youth culture, the kind of hippie era, coming together communally. So it has that feeling of kind of like a kumbaya campfire, kind of unifying spiritual almost for the hippie era. At least that's my impression of it.
welcome back to Low Pass Filter. We're talking about music with a function today. And I have kind of an odd music with a function, which is Made in Japan by Deep Purple, which is nobody's idea of music with a function, but I use it exclusively to clean the house. So I put on Made in Japan, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with this record, you should get it and just play it. There's a new expanded version out with some extra material on it, which is also really great. But I just find it to be it's very energetic, and it. For me purposely, my function for Deep Purple Made in Japan is to get as much done in a task that I'm not that happy about in the shortest period of time.
That's great, man. So Deep Purple equals deep cleaning.
Yes.
For you. I use that record to just rock the heck out. But that's an interesting one that you bring up, because when I was 13 or 14, I discovered that album. I think around 13 maybe. I used to have it on an auto repeat cassette deck, and I would fall asleep to it night after night. So I didn't think I was necessarily using it to fall asleep, but it just happened to kind of coincide with that time of night and drifting off, and then I would wake up and hear it still playing. It's a sidebar, but if you've never heard I'm going to draw a blank now. Help me out. The heavy ballad tune on there.
Child in Time.
Yeah, Child in Time. If you've never heard that live version, go get it.
Part of me thinks that Deep Purple might have been the inspiration for Spinal Tap in some ways. they're the same. I mean, that particular version of Deep Purple. There were a lot of different versions of Deep Purple, but the Ian Gillan, Glover, Ritchie Blackmore, version of that band very much feels like the Spinal Tap era. I mean, there's some bombast there. We're going on a complete tangent here.
Yeah.
They were fairly bombastic. Super duper talented. Ian Gillan was just he was amazing. Of course, went on to do I think he originated the role in Jesus Christ Superstar, which you see on your list. So great for cleaning the house. Next time you clean the house, put on Made in Japan, and you'll see how much you get done in a very short period of time.
Man, I'm going to try that. I want it to be fairly linear, but I guess it's not that important. When we were talking about meditational music and relaxation music, I had one other thing on there as an example that's kind of a newer concept, or at least it's become more popular lately, called ASMR. And unfortunately, I always forget what ASMR stands for. I should have written that down. But a lot of the stuff you'll hear there, hardly anybody would consider it music. I personally accept sound in various ways of expression to be music if you want to consider it music. So, like say the avant-gardists like John Cage and people like that from the earlier part of the 20th century to mid-century, who considered that music? Not the majority for sure. But to me it can be, and I tend to like to use the term soundscape a lot. Because for me it is a form of music, I guess, because it's sound being pleasing and lighting up, I think, that same part of my brain, even though it may may or may not have melody and rhythmic structure and things like that. It might even be sometimes dissonant sounds or abrasive sounds or field recordings of just things occurring. But anyway, I thought that tied in. The example I put in my Spotify playlist, I think, is a really long thing that is very typical ASMR sounds, which a lot of people use to either quell anxiety or fall asleep to, people with insomnia. I actually discovered it through my son. He would fall asleep playing ASMR videos on YouTube. I found it very curious at first, but it's interesting stuff.
Now, I noticed you have the Environments records on there. A couple examples off the Environment series of records.
That's right.
That could be considered that same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Rain and thunderstorms. And I forget what the second one was.
Yes, shoot. It could be like a stream or ocean sound. For some reason, I'm not seeing it. Oh, there we go. Gentle rain in a pine forest. I love those records. I don't often sit and put them on, but I do quite enjoy that sort of textural experience with sound. But I also enjoy playing around with it, sampling it, mixing two records together and having those natural sounds in there can be a nice experience.
Yeah. Well, the other things that I have on here are things that maybe go along in the political realm, So I had "Hail to the Chief," which is a song that's played when the president is at a ceremony of some sort or another and comes walking out. "Taps" is another one, which is played at military funerals.
Mm-hmm.
It was never meant for that. Originally, it was meant basically as lights out for Army people during the Civil War, but it eventually became connected with funeral music for military people. And then I noticed on your list you have the Chopin Funeral March as well, which is another piece of music that I think it's like an archetypical song connected with death. I'm not sure that anybody plays it at their funerals anymore. You're probably more likely to get "Sweet Caroline" or something than that. But it really does immediately associate with death and funerals.
Yeah. Well, it's in the title of the song. That is very much for that specific functional purpose. I'm sure if you enjoy classical music, you'd appreciate that on its own merit as a composition and piece of music. And also marching music in general. And I think we touched on this before, perhaps, but a core element in the roots of modern 20th century music, when we started, having the development of jazz music, and then eventually rock and roll music, the drum corps, the marching band music. At one time, those musicians would be out on the field with the soldiers. And then, of course, playing for military events as well, homecomings of soldiers after their tours, things like that. But a lot of what's considered the rudiments of drumming, the 26 drum rudiments, those directly come from the snare drum players who were out there with the soldiers. So that's very functional, and it's interesting that created a basis for the kind of grooves and rhythms that we hear in Western popular music.
Yeah, I had Pomp and Circumstance, which is something that's heard at college graduations. By Edward Elgar. I was in. I think I may have mentioned this in another show, but I played the trumpet in starting in elementary school and all the way through high school. I played a number of brass instruments as well. But one of our functions was to play Pomp and Circumstance 26 or 28 times while the entire class marched in for graduation. So it was just the processional part of it too. There's like movements to this whole thing no one has ever heard, right? Because it's only the processional that we hear for graduation, right?
Yeah. And so you would have to cycle through that a couple dozen times during. Man, you never want to play that song again or hear that again, I suppose.
Yeah. So I had protest music as well. There's music with a function. So, of course, Bob Dylan in his early incarnation as a folk singer wrote various protest songs, including Masters of War and The Times They Are A-Changing. Back to his inspiration, Woody Guthrie, and a number, songs about some people like John Dillinger. Some people rob people with a gun, and other people rob people with a fountain pen. Or of course, the famous missing verse from "This Land Is Your Land" that no one ever sings, which is that on the front of the sign it says "No trespassing," but on the back it don't say nothing. Right?
Yeah. Pete Seeger could be included in that list, I suppose. Joan Baez. But Woody Guthrie was the generation before, and I'm sure there's got to be other examples of people singing folk music in protest.
The Weavers.
The Weavers, yeah. And that kind of makes me think that in a way, that has a specific function in terms of dissent, expressing disagreement with politics or social politics. But any music with lyrics, is then expressing some kind of message, or a lot of music with lyrics, maybe not always. Something's being communicated, so that's functional in itself to share ideas, to share feelings. But yeah, protest music, I think, is a good addition to the list. There's a specific space that it's designed to inhabit, and at that time during the Vietnam War, those artists, they were trying to affect change, a change in people's consciousness.
I also think look for the Union label and Solidarity Forever, as maybe not a protest song, but in some ways it is, but also team building sorts of songs, that the unions used, at rallies and to bring unions in and keep them from being taken apart. Kind of hasn't worked that way in our modern era, but that's what those songs were originally designed to do, to build teams and cohesion in a union situation. And of course, that's an adversarial us versus them sort of situation.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess sometimes today, when you think of folk music, it's kind of inextricable from that intention or meaning. Not always. A lot of folk music is just telling stories of where people come from and what their lives are like and stuff. But protest music and folk music definitely goes hand in hand. Music of the people.
Yeah. So another area that we both had an intersection was music for dancing. So
Yeah.
uh, things like the Power, which is everybody dance now.
Right.
And also I put in David Byrne's soundtrack for the Catherine Wheel,
Okay.
which is and the example I have is Big Business, which was choreographed by Twyla Tharp. So
Yeah.
and
That was a modern dance theatrical production.
right.
I'm sure you may have been hipper to that at the time, being older. I was around 10 when Stop Making Sense came out by the Talking Heads, of course. And if you could imagine me trying to find the song Big Business on the Talking Heads records, where is that song? Eventually I figured it out, of course. But yeah, and of course they adapted it, to fit into that concert. I'm trying to see my examples. I felt like my examples of dance music. I had Gonna Make You Sweat by CNC Music Factory, which is similar to the Snap song that you mentioned, The Power. So that's kind of music to make you dance, but I was also thinking of music people use when they're working out and exercising. And the CNC Music Factory definitely seemed to be one of those workout songs, which kind of became popular in the 90s, I think. There was lots of workout mixes.
Sweating to the oldies.
Sweating to the oldies. Well, Richard Simmons started that, I think.
There's a great record by James Brown, which was from that period, and it's just like medleys of a lot of great James Brown stuff, just end to end in like these 10 to 12 minute long medleys, remixed and pump with a pump in kick drum, and that sort of thing. It works really well. But that definitely had a function, and it is to make people get on their leotards and sweatbands, and their wristbands and
the jazzercise movement.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, I don't know if you go to the gym or go for jogs. I don't tend to do that stuff, but we know people today that talk about their favorite music for those situations. When I go out for a run, I have to have this kind of music. Some people it might be heavy metal. Some people it might be that kind of housey dance music. I don't know what it is. I've never really done that myself, but I get it. I guess it's motivational.
They pick up the bass line, get people moving. So and they've got that 120,
Right.
120 to 140 going, and get people's heart rates up.
You got to know your BPMs when you're exercising. Well,
so I noticed we have an intersection on a couple of other things here, and they're both lullabies. So I had Brahms' lullaby, and you had Twinkle Twinkle.
Yeah, and so Twinkle Twinkle and the Brahms lullaby. I guess I think I went from the sort of educational music for children. Then I started thinking about songs that comfort children, songs that our parents would sing to us. I didn't put a lot of examples there, but Twinkle Twinkle for some people might be some of the earliest music they heard. Especially of a certain era, I would think. One for me was Puff the Magic Dragon. to have that sung to me when I was a little kid. It was just so comforting. It felt like your mother or father were, wrapping you up in their arms and trying to sing you to sleep,
I don't want to sound like I'm 90, but do people sing lullabies to their kids anymore, or is there an app for that?
Hopefully there's some good people out there that still make that connection. I don't think it has to be that way, but yeah, it's a sweet, it's part of that bond between you and your parent,
So what else? We have also Sprach Zarathustra.
Yes.
And that kind of fits into one of the other things I had on there, was a couple of pieces of film music that get used an awful lot. I think since the 2001 movie, also Sprach, Thus Spoke God, is kind of associated with that, and then it gets tagged on either comically or semi-seriously to any sort of reveal of something or another. But there are a lot of pieces of classical music that get reused over and over again in film. And the one that I think of a lot is Carmine Burana. Something that has been in, anything from Flashdance to, you name it. It's in so many, or Adagio from Strings by Samuel Barber, very evocative, and good. It can almost bring you to tears, kind of song, but it gets used and used over and over again. And so then that brings us to things like film music, the Star Wars theme, John Williams, of course, and Leroy Newman, these really famous film composers who the music is specifically constructed to function in the context of a film. It may be outside of the context of the film, but its original purpose is really to support visual material.
Indeed. That could be an episode in and of itself, the world of film music, film scoring. And then, of course, you actually get to something that's a bit more modern. I think it goes back, it actually goes really far back, especially when you start talking about musicals. But the idea of popular songs in films become more popular over the decades in recent history, using songs that already exist as sort of vehicle pieces to create excitement and highlight an aspect of a particular scene in a movie or something. But
easier than writing a song for a musical. It's already written. Written. You just take it off the shelf. You pay the rights for it.
But today it's used as kind of its own art form, though. Finding those right songs that really set off a mood or evoke an emotion to go along with the scene. But in the realm of film scoring, I mean, I said that could be a topic unto itself because it's massive. It's actually a form of music that it is kind of ignored by the majority, I think. I'm sure maybe people subconsciously appreciate it while they're watching a film. But people like you and I probably more than most collect film scores because it can be very exciting. And actually, when you listen to them outside of the film, you hear things that you may not have even heard in the film, or maybe it gets chopped up and bits of it are used in a film. And then I was going to say, I think there's that, which is, creating this backdrop, this ambient backdrop for a scene in a movie. But what you were talking about first, I think, is kind of a substrain of film scoring, which are those songs like Also Sprach Zarathustra, that become iconic, anthemic pieces of music that you associate with a specific time in your life or a character of a movie that becomes iconic. So that was a piece of music that already existed. It wasn't written for 2001, which it became totally associated with. But I was thinking stuff like the theme to Rocky, Gonna Fly Now in Rocky, the 2-note salvo for Jaws, which just became so iconic. And so those are part of a film score, but they also take on a life of their own. It's this iconic piece of music that people then kind of associate with anytime this happens, or if you're experiencing this in your life. Who hasn't sung the theme to Rocky in their head when they did something they felt was kind of triumphant? You accomplished something, so yeah, that's very, very functional.
And we were talking about this the other day at your store about chamber music. And, we think of classical music as sort of highfalutin and intellectual today. But at the time, it was composed for, royalty and, hangers-on to sit around and play cards, and gossip and do whatever, they did back in the 17th and 18th century. It's fabulous stuff. I think of like Mozart's 3 divertimentos is like one of my favorites. I think I had Haydn on the list, and Haydn wrote, of course, he lived very long. He wrote a lot of chamber music. I think it's like in the hundreds of different pieces. But those were all just very functional, just throwaway pieces. Fortunately, they weren't used to Ratfish or anything. They did keep, somebody kept a copy of them somewhere, but they were meant for an occasion. They would have these what they call masks, which were like plays. Where the royalty would play a part, and they would have like, big boats that they would float, and do crazy stuff with, and then that was the end of that piece of music. No one got stuck in a drawer. And then, a couple hundred years later, it's now, intellectual, highfalutin, high class music. And that's the absolute opposite of what it was at the time.
That is amazing. That's really amazing. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around that, because at least from a perspective of living in the 20th century, there had been time for people to rediscover that stuff and examine it and recreate it. Because of course there were no recordings of classical music up until a modern classical age. And so then it becomes revered and exalted as this really high level, highbrow musical composition. I was thinking as you were talking about that, an analogy might be kind of not a perfect analogy maybe, but when you think of like Leonardo da Vinci being paid by someone to make works of art, where he was revered for his talent, but he was still working under an elite person, and a lot of great artists of centuries past. Kind of similarly, they had to, somebody had to say, I want you to paint for me. I'd like to have some nice pieces to hang on the wall, or this church needs some works of art. They didn't live a life of high society because they were that talented necessarily.
Well, it's no accident that there is an organization now called Patreon, which is used to support things like YouTube. We have here at our radio station, KCCH, we have a Patreon page. And you don't have aristocrats anymore who can fund your career in oil painting or making YouTube videos or whatever it is that you do, NFTs. You have to either have a steady stream of income from something else or be an established artist. And yeah, Leonardo was supported by various princes here and there. And as was Bach. Bach was concertmaster. I forget which king it was that he worked for. But yeah, these composers' entire lives was going from one royal court to another and being supported somehow. And I don't think it's bad that we've lost that now, but it definitely something needs to come in to replace it. In the 30s, they had the WPA work project where they actually paid people to compose music and to write poems and to paint pictures, and a very leftist, communistic, socialistic sort of idea. But it was because people didn't have any other way of living, talk about your starving artists,
Yeah, that ties into something else that's a little adjacent. We already talked about film score, but there was that whole era in the 50s and 60s that we refer to now as library music. So you're talking about professional musicians who were paid to record music that they didn't themselves get to release and popularize. The stuff was just, given to a studio's library to use when they needed it, to use it for films, commercials, backdrops of any kind, television broadcasts, things like that. And DJs discovered that music because it's some of the grooviest, funkiest stuff sometimes that can be sampled into other stuff. But again, that's a form of making music for a functionality. We also, you kind of came close. I had the Star Spangled Banner in the list, anthems, national anthems. But I think my final thing that we didn't completely touch on is music of the musicals. I know we're running out of time a little bit, but I suspect you're a fan of musicals as well.
Oh yeah.
And it's functional, right? It's a form of music that's used to advance the arc of a story, of a play. And there was an era where a lot of those musical numbers became popular music, songs that everybody knew and loved. Today, it's not quite like that. People consider it this kind of, unique, culty form of music.
So we have about 5 minutes to close this out. And I wanted to, before we do that, this is a little off topic too, but I wanted to have you tell people about your other video venture that you're doing and how they can find that.
Yes, well, thank you. I'm a very regular streamer, as they say now. I guess we're called streamers. And I had been on a platform called Mixcloud, which was designed for DJs to live stream. But I just recently moved over to Twitch. there's a lot there. Some people may already be familiar with it, but anyway, it lends very well towards a connection between all the DJs and a community support amongst all the DJs, which is really cool.
Tell us how you can find it.
Okay, so it's twitch.tv/DJ_Nighty, Nitey. I'm on Twitch as DJ Nighty. It's not just a replacement for being able to play out live and go see live DJs. It's really becoming a whole new thing, and there's a lot of people that really like to get on their laptop or their phone and just hang out and listen to the selections of DJs and chat with all the other people that come in, and so it's a very interesting, unique thing. And as doing what would have been a radio show, it's a mix between radio and performance and actually really directly connecting with the listeners. So
I might as well plug myself as well. I do a show down at K-Mud on the first and third Saturday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. It's called A Little Night Music in the Afternoon with Mateo Noche. And this is actual terrestrial radio, so you don't need much more than a receiver up here in Eureka. It's 88.1, 91.1 down in Garberville. There's a radio station in Laytonville as well, and we also get out to Shelter Cove. K-Mud is a great organization, so whatever you're listening to, you're going to find something interesting and intriguing there. That's about all the time we have for today. It's been really great talking to you, Bandon, as always. And I want to thank everyone for watching. You can find our Spotify playlist, as I mentioned, down below. You can use the comment section to suggest topics or comment on us. And if we've made any mistakes, I'm sure you can spend the time correcting the mistakes that we made. You can also contact us directly at lowpassfilter2020@gmail.com and send in your suggestions or ideas for future shows. And we'll see you next time on Low Pass Filter.
Thanks for watching Low Pass Filter. Contact the hosts at lowpassfilter2020@gmail.com. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified about future shows.